How one Hell's Angel's crazy idea saved his brothers when the blizzard hit Route 66. The wind hit like a fist, and Reed knew they were dead men riding. 40 miles from anywhere, Route 66 stretched out white and endless, the center line already buried under 6 inches of fresh snow that kept falling like God had forgotten how to stop. His Harley's front tire wobbled, caught ice, and Reed felt the bike start to slide. Behind him, 8 brothers fought their own battles, engines roaring defiance into a storm that didn't care about leather, chrome, or the code they lived by. Reed's hands were numb inside his gloves, his face a mask of frozen hell, and the temperature gauge on the only bike that still had one read 12 degrees and dropping. They'd passed the last house 20 minutes ago, and the next town, if there even was a next town, was God knew how far ahead through a wall of white that swallowed everything. Reed's brother Cole pulled up beside him, visor frosted over, and shouted something that got torn away by the wind. Reed couldn't hear the words, but he read the question in Cole's eyes. What now? And that's when Reed saw it, a shape in the whiteout, barely visible, impossible, and perfect. And the crazy idea hit him like lightning, the kind of idea that would either save them all or kill them faster. Wait, before the next ride begins, if this story already hit you right in the chest, tell us where you're watching from. To ride with the Brotherhood through the next promise, loss, or redemption, subscribe and join the club. Engines up, back to the road. 6 hours earlier, the sky had been clear as glass. They'd left Amarillo at dawn, 9 brothers on 9 bikes, heading west on Route 66 for the annual Memorial Run, a tradition older than half the men riding. Every year, they made the pilgrimage to Flagstaff to honor the brothers they'd lost, to pour whiskey on graves and remember names that echoed in their hearts like thunder. Reed had been doing this run for 15 years, since he was 23 and stupid enough to think a patch made him invincible. Now, at 38, he knew better. But he kept riding anyway, because the brothers who died deserved to be remembered, and the brothers who lived deserved to know they wouldn't be forgotten. Cole, his blood brother, rode point with him. Same gray eyes, same stubborn jaw, different scars. Behind them came Diesel, the road captain, a mountain of a man who could rebuild an engine blindfolded and had a laugh that could shake windows. Then Bishop, the club's sergeant-at-arms, quiet and watchful, with a military bearing he'd never quite shaken. Hawk, no relation to the Hawk from another story, just a common road name. Road Sweep, keeping an eye on the pack. And scattered between them were Mason, Trace, Knox, Ryder, and Dalton, each of them carrying their own histories, their own reasons for being on this road. The weather report that morning had called for clear skies with a chance of snow in the evening. A chance. Reed had checked it 3 times, checked the radar, checked the long-range forecast. Everything said they'd be in Flagstaff by sunset, safe and sound, before the weather turned. Everything said this would be an easy run. Everything lied. By noon, the sky had changed. Not gradually, not with warning, but like someone had flipped a switch. One minute they were cruising through New Mexico high desert under blue sky. The next, they were riding into a gray wall that looked like the end of the world. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an hour. The wind picked up, gusting hard enough to push the bike sideways. And then the snow started. Light at first, just flurries that melted on their visors, but building, always building. Reed called a stop at a gas station in some nowhere town whose name he never caught. They filled their tanks, drank bad coffee, and studied the sky like it might give them answers.
"We should hole up," Mason said. He was the youngest, 26, with a wife and baby girl waiting for him back in Texas. "Find a motel, wait it out." Diesel shook his head. "Look around, kid. You see a motel? This place has 1 gas station and a closed diner. Next real town is 60 miles west." "We can make 60 miles, Bishop said. "Not if this gets worse," Cole said, staring at the darkening horizon. Reed, what do you think? Reed studied the sky, the wind, the way the snow was starting to come down harder. Every instinct he had said to stop, to turn back, to find shelter. But behind them was Amarillo, 3 hours away, and ahead was Gallup, maybe 2 hours if they pushed it. They were right in the middle, the worst possible place to be. "We push west," Reed said finally. "We stay tight, we stay smart, and we get to Gallup before this really hits." No one argued. They trusted Reed. That was the thing about being a road captain. People trusted you to make the call, even when the call was a guess dressed up as certainty. They saddled up and rode. For the first hour, it was manageable. The snow fell, but the road was still visible. The wind gusted, but they'd ridden in wind before. They kept tight formation, watching each other's backs, communicating with hand signals because the wind tore words apart. Reed kept checking his mirrors, counting bikes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All present, all accounted for. Then the storm got mean. The snow went from falling to driving, horizontal sheets that cut visibility to maybe 50 feet. The wind went from gusting to howling, a sustained scream that threatened to rip them off their bikes. The temperature kept dropping. Reed could feel it in his bones, in the way his hands cramped on the grips, in the way his breath froze on his beard. His tires started slipping more often, finding ice under the snow, fighting him for control. He saw a sign flash past. Gallup, 40 miles.
40 miles might as well have been 400. They wouldn't make it. Reed knew it with cold certainty. Not in this. Not at this speed, which had dropped from 60 miles an hour to 30, then 20, then 15. Not with visibility like this. Not with the road disappearing under snow that was already 4 inches deep and getting deeper by the minute. He needed to stop. He needed to think. He needed to... That's when Cole pulled up beside him, visor frosted over, and shouted the question Reed was asking himself. What now? And that's when Reed saw it. Off to the right, barely visible through the whiteout, a shape. Big, rectangular, dark against the white. Reed squinted, trying to make it out through the snow and the ice crusting his visor. At first, he thought it might be a building, maybe a barn or a warehouse. But as they got closer, the shape resolved into something else entirely. A semi-truck. An 18-wheeler, parked on the shoulder, cab facing east, trailer facing west. And it wasn't just any trailer. It was one of those big enclosed haulers, the kind that carries cars or equipment. The kind that would be empty inside, protected from the wind, insulated from the cold. The crazy idea hit Reed all at once. We could fit the bikes inside. It was insane. It was impossible. It was also the only chance they had. Reed pointed at the truck and signaled the others to follow. He pulled off the road, or what he thought was the road, it was hard to tell anymore, and rode up to the trailer. The others followed, engines rumbling in the storm, confused but trusting. They formed a circle in the lee of the trailer where the wind was slightly less brutal. "What are we doing?" Diesel shouted over the wind. Reed pulled off his gloves. His hands were so cold it hurt, and tried the trailer door. Locked. Of course it was locked. He looked around, saw no sign of the driver. The cab's windows were dark, covered in snow. Either the driver had abandoned the truck and hitched a ride, or they were inside, sleeping or dead. Reed banged on the cab door. No answer. He tried again, harder. Still nothing. "We need to get inside that trailer," Reed shouted to the others. "It's locked," Knox yelled back. "Then we unlock it." Bishop stepped forward. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small toolkit. He never went anywhere without it. "Step back," he said. Then he went to work on the lock with a tension wrench and a pick, his hands steady despite the cold, his face grim with concentration. It took 5 minutes that felt like 5 hours.
Reed and the others huddled together, trying to block the wind, stamping their feet to keep circulation going. Mason's lips were turning blue. Trace was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. They were running out of time. Then Bishop said, "Got it." The lock popped. Bishop pulled the door open, and they all stared inside. The trailer was empty, completely empty. Just a big metal box, maybe 50 feet long, with tie-down rails on the floor and walls. It was dark inside, but it was protected. No wind, no snow, just cold, empty space. Reed looked at his brothers. "We ride the bikes inside. We seal the door. We wait out the storm." There was a moment of silence. Then Diesel said, "That's the craziest goddamn thing I've ever heard." "You got a better idea?" Reed asked. Diesel grinned, a wild, reckless grin. "Not even a little bit. Let's do it." Getting 9 Harleys up into a trailer in the middle of a blizzard turned out to be exactly as hard as it sounds. There was no ramp, so they had to improvise. Bishop and Knox scouted around and found some old wooden pallets half buried in snow about 20 yards away, probably left by the truck driver for some reason. They dragged them back and built a makeshift ramp, wedging the pallets against the trailer's edge and praying they'd hold. Reed went first. He gunned his engine, aimed for the pallets, and rode up. The bike wobbled, the pallets creaked, and for one heart-stopping second, Reed thought he was going to flip backward and crush himself under 500 pounds of Harley. But he leaned forward, gave it more gas, and the front tire caught the lip of the trailer. He was in. 1 down, 8 to go. Cole went next, then Diesel, then Bishop. Each time, the pallets creaked a little more. Each time, Reed held his breath. But one by one, they all made it. 9 bikes, 9 brothers, all packed into a trailer that suddenly felt a lot smaller than it had looked from outside. The last one in was Hawk. He killed his engine, climbed off his bike, and immediately went back to the trailer door. "We need to close this," he said. They pulled the pallets inside and slid the big door shut. The sound of the wind cut off like someone had hit a mute button. The sudden silence was deafening. They stood there in the darkness, breathing hard, dripping melted snow, and for a long moment nobody said anything. Then Dalton started laughing. "We just rode our bikes into a stolen semi-trailer in the middle of a blizzard. This is either the smartest thing we've ever done or the stupidest." "Both," Reed said. "Definitely both." Diesel pulled out a flashlight and swept it around the trailer. The bikes were packed in tight, but they'd all fit. There was maybe 10 feet of empty space at the far end of the trailer. Enough room for the brothers to sit down, to huddle together, to wait. "Now what?" Mason asked. He was still shaking, his face pale. "Now we survive," Reed said. "We share body heat, we stay awake, and we wait for the storm to pass." "What if the driver comes back?" Trace asked. "Then we apologize and offer to pay for the lock," Reed said. "But I don't think anyone's coming back. Not in this." They settled in. The trailer was cold, not as cold as outside, but still cold enough that they could see their breath. They pulled off their wet gloves and jackets, wringing out what water they could. They gathered at the far end of the trailer, sitting in a tight circle, sharing warmth. Bishop pulled out a pack of hand warmers from his kit and distributed them. Diesel had a thermos of coffee that he passed around. Knox produced a flask of whiskey. "To Reed's crazy-ass idea," he said, raising the flask. "To stayin' alive," Cole added. They drank, and the whiskey burned going down, a small fire in their chests. Outside, the storm raged. They could hear it, the wind screaming, the snow battering the trailer's walls, the occasional groan of metal as a gust hit particularly hard. But inside, they were safe. Cold, uncomfortable, but safe. Reed leaned against the trailer wall and closed his eyes. His heart was still racing, adrenaline still pumping. They'd made it. Against all odds, they'd made it. But they weren't out of this yet.
The storm could last for hours. They had no way to call for help. Cell service had died miles back. They had some food, some water, enough to last the night if they rationed. But if the storm didn't break by morning... Reed pushed the thought away, one problem at a time. "So," Diesel said, breaking the silence, "anyone want to explain how we're going to get the bikes back out of this thing?" There was a beat of silence. Then everyone started laughing, the kind of exhausted, slightly hysterical laughter that comes when you've just survived something you shouldn't have. "We'll figure it out," Reed said. "We always do." The hours crawled by like wounded animals. They talked to pass the time, to keep their minds off the cold and the uncertainty. They told stories, road stories mostly, tales of runs gone right and runs gone wrong, of close calls and impossible luck. They talked about the brothers they'd lost, the ones they were riding to honor. They talked about families waiting for them at home, about jobs and lives, and the things that anchored them when they weren't on the road. Mason talked about his daughter, Emma, who was 8 months old and had just started crawling. "She goes after the dog," he said, grinning despite the cold. "Just chases him around the house, laughing. My wife sends me videos every day. Yesterday, Emma grabbed the dog's tail, and he just sat there and took it, gentle as anything. Sarah says Emma's going to be a handful." His smile faded a little. "I kept thinking, out there in the storm, that I might never see her grow up, never see her first steps or hear her first words, never teach her to ride." "You will," Reed said firmly. "We're here. We made it. You'll see all of it." Mason nodded, but his hands were shaking, and not just from the cold. Trace talked about his dad, who'd been in the club 30 years ago, back before Trace was born. "He died when I was 12, heart attack, right there at the clubhouse during a poker game. They said he went out laughing, holding a full house. But everyone who knew him said he was one of the best, never left a brother behind, always rode point on the dangerous runs, always made sure everyone got home." He pulled out his patch, worn and faded. "This was his. My mom kept it in a box for 15 years. When I turned 21 and told her I wanted to prospect, she gave it to me. Said if I was going to do this, I should do it right. That's why I wear his patch, to remember, to be the kind of man he was." "He'd be proud," Diesel said. "I knew your old man. He was solid, and you're just like him." Trace's eyes shone in the flashlight beam. "Thanks, brother. That means something." Knox spoke up then, his voice rough. "My kid brother died 3 years ago. OD'd on fentanyl. He was 23. I tried to get him clean, tried to help him, but he wouldn't listen. One night he took something he thought was Oxy, and it killed him in his sleep." Knox's jaw tightened. "I found him. I was the one who found him. And I keep thinking, what if I'd done more? What if I'd tried harder?" "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved," Bishop said quietly. "I learned that in the war. Some men want to live, some men want to die, and most men are somewhere in between. You did what you could. Doesn't feel like enough. It never does," Bishop said. "But you're here, you're alive, and you're riding in his memory. That's something." Knox nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess it is." Bishop talked about Afghanistan then, about the brothers he'd lost there, about the IED that killed 3 men in his unit and left him with a scar that ran from his collarbone to his hip. "I came home and I didn't know what to do with myself. Civilian life felt fake, like I was playing a part in a movie. I couldn't connect with anyone who hadn't been there. I couldn't explain what it felt like to watch your friends die and keep going because you had to." He paused, staring at nothing. "Then I walked into a bar one night and saw guys in cuts, started talking to them. They got it. They understood brotherhood, understood loyalty, understood what it meant to ride together and trust each other with your life. So I joined, and I found what I'd been looking for, a reason to keep going. Men I could trust. We trust you too, Reed said. You're solid, Bishop. We all know it. Bishop nodded, but didn't respond. He wasn't comfortable with gratitude, never had been. Ryder, who'd been quiet most of the night, finally spoke. I never told you guys this, but I've got a kid, a son. He's 14 now, lives with his mom in California. I haven't seen him in 3 years. His voice cracked. She won't let me. Says she's a bad influence. Says she doesn't want him around bikers. And maybe she's right. Maybe I am a bad influence. But he's my son, and I think about him every day. I send money when I can. I write letters he never answers. And I keep hoping that someday he'll understand that I love him, even if I don't know how to show it. You're showing it, Dalton said. You're still trying. That's what matters. Is it? Because it doesn't feel like it's enough. Nothing ever feels like enough when it comes to our kids, Mason said. But we do it anyway. We keep trying, we keep loving them, and maybe someday they'll understand. Ryder wiped his eyes. Thanks, man. They talked and they listened, and the words became a kind of warmth, a fire that kept the cold at bay. They shared their fears, their regrets, their hopes. They talked about the things they'd done wrong and the things they wished they could do over. They talked about forgiveness, for others, for themselves. Around 10 o'clock, Diesel started coughing. It was a wet, rattling cough that echoed in the metal trailer. You okay? Reed asked. Yeah, just cold. Lungs don't like it. Diesel coughed again, harder this time. I've had pneumonia twice. Doc says my lungs are scarred. Cold like this, it hits me hard. Reed felt a spike of worry. Pneumonia in these conditions could be deadly. You need to stay warm. We all need to huddle closer. They rearranged themselves, forming a tighter circle, sharing body heat more efficiently. They wrapped their jackets around Diesel, gave him the last of the hot coffee, rubbed his back to help with the coughing. It was the only thing they could do. Tell me something good, Diesel said, between coughs. Tell me something to think about besides the cold. Hawk spoke up. When I retire, I'm buying a bar. Nothing fancy, just a place where brothers can come and drink and tell stories. I'm gonna call it The Last Stop. It'll have good whiskey, bad karaoke, and a wall where we can hang photos of everyone who's ridden with us, living and dead. A place to remember. I'll drink there, Knox said. We all will, Cole added. We'll make it the official clubhouse. Hawk smiled. Yeah, that sounds good. They talked about dreams then, about the lives they wanted to build, the things they wanted to do when the riding was done. They talked about redemption and second chances. They talked about what it meant to be a good man, a good brother, a good father. And slowly, as the hours passed, they realized something. They weren't just surviving the storm. They were becoming something more, something deeper, something forged in cold and fear and shared breath. They were becoming the kind of brothers who would die for each other, who would ride into hell together, who would never, ever leave a man behind. This night in the trailer, this impossible, freezing, desperate night was changing them, and they knew they would carry it with them for the rest of their lives. Around midnight, Reed checked his watch, surprised it was still working. The wind finally started to die down. The battering against the trailer walls eased. The howling faded to a moan, then to a whisper. By 2 in the morning, it was almost quiet. Storm's passing, Hawk said, his breath misting in the beam of the flashlight. Reed nodded. Well, wait until dawn. Give it time to be sure. Then we figure out how to get out of here. They dozed in shifts, 2 men awake at all times to make sure no one succumbed to the cold or hypothermia's sneaky pull into sleep that didn't wake. Reed took the first watch with Cole. They sat side by side, backs against the trailer wall, listening to their brothers snore and shift in their sleep. That was quick thinking, Cole said quietly, spotting this trailer. It was luck, Reed said. Luck and vision. You saw it when the rest of us were just trying to stay on the road. That's why you're road captain. That's why we trust you. Reed shook his head. Road captain, club president, doesn't matter. We're brothers. We take care of each other. That's all this was. It was more than that, Cole insisted. You saved our lives tonight. Don't downplay it.
If you hadn't seen that trailer, if you hadn't made the call to get us inside, we'd be frozen bodies on Route 66 right now. They'd find us in the spring thaw, bikes buried in snow, and they'd talk about how stupid we were to ride into a storm. But we're not stupid. We're here. We're alive because of you. Reed was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the moment he'd seen the trailer, about the crazy idea that had hit him like lightning. What if he hadn't looked right at that exact moment? What if the trailer hadn't been there? What if the door hadn't opened? What if Bishop hadn't been able to pick the lock? Too many what-ifs. They were here. They were alive. That was enough. I've been thinking, Cole said, about what I'd say to my kids if I didn't make it home, about the last words they'd remember. And I realized I haven't told them enough, haven't said I love them enough, haven't made sure they know what they mean to me. You'll tell them when we get home, Reed said. Yeah, I will. But I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not assuming I'll have tomorrow. Tonight taught me that. Reed understood. He thought about his own wife, Sarah, about their daughter Riley, who was 10, and their son Jack, who was 7. He thought about all the times he'd been too tired or too distracted to really listen to them, to really be present. He thought about how much had taken for granted. Me too, Reed said. When I get home, I'm going to be better, going to be there, going to make sure they know. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Reed heard a sound that made his blood run cold, a low, labored breathing from across the trailer. He grabbed the flashlight and swept it over the sleeping forms. Diesel was shaking, his face pale, his lips tinged blue. The coughing had stopped, but he was struggling to breathe. Diesel! Reed scrambled over to him, Cole right behind. The others woke, startled. What's wrong? Bishop asked, instantly alert. His breathing. Something's wrong. They surrounded Diesel, trying to warm him, trying to help. Bishop checked his pulse. It was rapid but weak. Diesel's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Can't breathe right, he managed. Pneumonia, Bishop said grimly, or the start of it. We need to get him warm and get him to a hospital. But they were trapped in a trailer in the middle of a blizzard, miles from anywhere. Reed felt panic clawing at his throat. They'd survived this far. They couldn't lose someone now. We wait for dawn, Reed said, forcing his voice to stay calm. Then we move as fast as we can. Diesel, you hear me? You hold on. You stay with us. Diesel nodded weakly. They spent the next hours keeping Diesel awake, keeping him warm, giving him small sips of water. They talked to him constantly, telling stories, making him respond, refusing to let him slip away. It was the longest watch any of them had ever stood. Dawn came slowly, gray light seeping around the edges of the trailer door like a reluctant promise. Reed stood up, every muscle in his body stiff and aching, and went to the door. He cracked it open, just an inch, and looked outside. The world was white. Snow covered everything, the road, the shoulders, the landscape beyond, a blank canvas that erased all familiar markers. It was beautiful in a stark, terrible way. The sun was just coming up, painting the snow pink and gold, shadows long and blue. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt sacred. Reed opened the door wider. The cold air rushed in, but it was different now, still, calm, the kind of cold you could manage if you were careful. He stepped out onto the snow and immediately sank to his knees. The snow was at least 2 feet deep, maybe more in the drifts. "We've got a problem," he said. One by one, the others came to the door. They stood together, looking out at the transformed world, and the reality of their situation hit them hard. Their tire tracks from the night before were completely buried. The road was invisible. And they had a brother who needed a hospital, fast. So, Bishop said, ever practical, how do we get the bikes out? And more importantly, how do we get Diesel to a hospital through this? Reed's mind raced. They were 40 miles from Gallup, maybe more. Diesel couldn't ride in his condition, and even if the rest of them could navigate the snow, they'd be riding blind, hoping to find the road, hoping not to hit ice, hoping to make it before Diesel's condition got worse. We need to think this through, Reed said. We've got maybe 2-3 hours before Diesel's in real trouble. We need a plan that gets us all there safely. What if some of us ride ahead, Knox suggested. Scout the route, find help, come back? Too risky, Cole said. We split up, we lose our strength, we stay together. Then we all go, Diesel said weakly from inside the trailer. I can ride, I can make it. No, Reed said firmly. You can barely breathe. You're not riding solo. Then I ride with someone, double up. It wasn't ideal. Harleys weren't built for 2 riders over long distances, especially in snow. But it might work. Reed looked at Bishop, the biggest and strongest of them. You think you can handle the weight? Reed asked. Bishop nodded. I can handle it. Diesel rides with me. All right, Reed said. Here's the plan. We dig out the bikes, we get them down the ramp, and we ride formation, tight, no one falls back. We find the road and we follow it slow. When we hit Gallup, we go straight to the emergency room, no stops. Everyone clear? They nodded. They were clear. Getting the bikes out turned into a 2-hour ordeal. The snow on the ground was deep, at least 2 feet, deeper in places where it had drifted, and the bikes were heavy, over 500 pounds each. They had to dig out a path first, using their hands and whatever tools they could find in their saddlebags. They worked in shifts, 2 men digging while the others rested, conserving energy. Their hands went numb, their backs ached, their breath came in ragged gasps. But they kept going, because that's what brothers did. They rebuilt the makeshift ramp, reinforcing it with extra pallets they found buried nearby. Then came the delicate work of walking the bikes out, engines off, pushing them down the pallets and into the snow. Reed went first, his bike sliding and wobbling, but he kept it upright. One by one, the others followed. 9 bikes, 9 brothers, all making it down without injury. When all the bikes were out, they stood in the snow and looked at the trailer one last time. Reed walked around to the cab and climbed up to peer through the driver's side window. Inside, the cab was empty. No driver, no personal effects, no sign anyone had ever been there. It was like the truck had appeared out of nowhere, exactly when they needed it, and would disappear again once its purpose was fulfilled. Think we should leave a note? Knox asked, his voice carrying in the still air. Reed thought about it. Then he pulled out a marker from his jacket, he always carried one for marking maps, and wrote on the trailer's side, in big letters, "Thank you. You saved 9 lives. The Brothers of the Road." It wasn't much, but it was honest. It was true. They helped Diesel onto the back of Bishop's bike, securing him with bungee cords to keep him from falling off if he passed out. Diesel's face was gray, his breathing labored, but his eyes were determined. "I'm okay," he said. "Let's ride." They mounted their bikes. Reed turned the key, and his Harley roared to life, the sound echoing across the empty snow like a declaration of defiance. One by one, the others started their engines, until all 9 bikes were running, a chorus of power and survival and refusal to quit. They'd made it through the night. Now, they just had to make it through the day. Reed kicked his bike into gear and rolled forward. The snow was deep, but the bikes were made for this. Heavy, powerful, built to go through anything if you had the skill and the will.
They rode slow, maybe 10 miles an hour, staying tight, watching for ice beneath the snow. The road was barely visible, but they could make out the center line here and there, a yellow ghost beneath the white, and they followed it like a lifeline. Every few minutes, Reed checked his mirrors, counting bikes, making sure everyone was still there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All present, all accounted for. Bishop and Diesel rode in the middle of the pack, protected. The miles crawled by. 10 minutes felt like an hour. Every sound made Reed's heart jump. Was that a bike going down? Was that someone hitting ice? But they kept going, steady and careful, brothers watching out for brothers. After an hour, they saw a sign emerging from the snow. Gallop 30 miles. 30 miles? They'd made 10. They had 3 times that far to go, and Diesel was getting worse. Reed could see him slumping against Bishop's back, could see Bishop adjusting his grip to keep him upright. "We need to go faster," Cole said, pulling up beside Reed. "We go faster, we risk losing control. We crash, we all die. Diesel might die if we don't hurry." Reed knew it. He'd been thinking it. But what choice did they have? They were doing the best they could. Then, like a miracle, they heard it. The sound of an engine. Not a motorcycle engine, a truck engine. Big, powerful, getting closer. Reed looked back and saw it emerging from the whiteout behind them. A snowplow, orange lights flashing, blade pushing snow aside like it was nothing. Reed pulled over and signaled the others to stop. The snowplow came up beside them and stopped. The driver's window rolled down, and a weathered face peered out. A man in his 60s with kind eyes and a concerned expression. "You boys are crazy," he said. "Riding in this. We got caught in the storm," Reed said. "We've got a man who needs a hospital. How far to Gallop?" 28 miles. I'm clearing this stretch now. You follow behind me. You'll make it, but you gotta keep up." "We'll keep up," Reed promised. The snowplow driver nodded. "All right, stay close. And when you get to town, get that man to County Medical. It's right off the main drag." "Thank you," Reed said. "No problem. We take care of each other out here." The plow started moving again, blade clearing the road, and the brothers fell in behind it. The going was easier now. They could see the pavement, could ride faster, could make better time. They pushed it up to 30 miles an hour, then 40, staying tight behind the plow like ducklings behind their mother. Diesel held on. Bishop kept him upright, and mile by mile, they got closer to salvation. 90 minutes later, they saw the lights of Gallop rising out of the snow like a beacon. The town had power, the roads were being plowed, and there were people moving around. Salt trucks, emergency vehicles, citizens digging out their driveways. Civilization, safety, hope. Reed led them straight to County Medical, following signs through the partially cleared streets. They roared into the emergency room parking lot, engines loud in the quiet morning, and screeched to a stop. Reed was off his bike before it stopped moving, running for the ER doors. "We need help," he shouted, bursting through the sliding doors. "Man with pneumonia, hypothermia, respiratory distress." Nurses and orderlies came running with a gurney. Bishop and Knox carefully lifted Diesel off the bike and carried him inside, laying him on the stretcher. He was barely conscious now, his breathing shallow and ragged, his skin cold and clammy to the touch. He was exposed to extreme cold for about 10 hours, Reed told the lead nurse, a stern-faced woman in scrubs with efficient hands and sharp eyes. "He's got a history of pneumonia, scarred lungs. He started coughing around midnight, got progressively worse. Couldn't get him here until the storm broke." "How long has he been like this?" she asked, checking Diesel's vitals with practiced speed. "Breathing problems started maybe 6 hours ago, got really bad in the last 2. Oxygen saturation is at 78%, another nurse called out. Core temp 92 degrees. "We've got him," the lead nurse said, already moving. "You boys did good getting him here. We'll take care of him now." They wheeled Diesel through the double doors into the treatment area, and the brothers stood in the lobby, watching him disappear, feeling helpless and exhausted and relieved all at once. "He's going to make it, right?" Mason asked quietly, his voice shaking. "He has to," Cole said. "We didn't ride through hell just to lose him here." But there was doubt in his voice, and they all heard it. They waited. The hospital wouldn't let them all inside the treatment area. Pandemic protocols, limited visitors, standard emergency procedures. So they took turns. 2 men at a time could go to the waiting room, sit in uncomfortable plastic chairs, drink bad coffee from a machine that probably hadn't been cleaned since the previous administration. The others waited outside with the bikes, standing in the cold parking lot, too wired to sit, too worried to leave, too exhausted to do much else but pace. Reed and Cole took the first shift inside. They sat side by side, not talking, just being present for their brother, even though he couldn't see them. Around them, the ER hummed with activity. Other storm victims coming in with frostbite, car accident injuries, heart attacks from shoveling snow. The storm had been brutal to everyone. After an hour that felt like 10, a doctor came out. He was young, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a reassuring manner that came from practice. "Are you the ones who brought in Daniel Morrison?" They all tensed. "Diesel," Reed corrected automatically, standing up. "His name's Diesel, his road name. Is he okay?" The doctor smiled slightly. "Right, Diesel. He's stable. We've got him on high-flow oxygen and started aggressive warming protocols. We've also started IV antibiotics for what looks like the early stages of bacterial pneumonia. His core temperature is coming up, currently at 94.2, and his oxygen saturation has improved to 85%. That's good, right?" Cole asked. "It's very good. He was in the danger zone when you brought him in. Another few hours without treatment, and we'd be having a very different conversation." The doctor paused, studying them. "I have to ask, where were you guys during the storm? How did you survive exposure like that?" "We found a semi-trailer," Reed said. "Empty, unlocked. We rode the bikes inside and sealed the door." The doctor's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "You rode motorcycles into a trailer in the middle of a blizzard?" "It was that or die on the road." "That's—" The doctor shook his head slowly. "That's incredible. Quick thinking. That trailer probably saved all your lives. You know the storm killed 3 people last night? 2 in car accidents on I-40, 1 from exposure. Hikers got caught on a trail. By the time rescue found them this morning, it was too late. You boys are extraordinarily lucky to be alive." "We know," Reed said quietly. "Believe me, Doc, we know." The doctor nodded. "Diesel needs to stay here for at least 48 hours, possibly 72. We need to make sure the pneumonia doesn't progress and that his body temperature normalizes completely. Hypothermia can have delayed effects, cardiac issues, kidney problems. We need to monitor him closely." "Can we see him?" Mason asked from the doorway. He'd come in with Trace for the second shift. "Not yet. He's sedated right now, resting."
Maybe in a few hours, once he's more stable. In the meantime, the rest of you should get checked out too. You were all exposed to the same conditions. Any numbness in fingers or toes? Confusion? Excessive fatigue? They looked at each other. Mason's fingers had been tingling. Trace had been more tired than usual. Knox's toes hurt. "Come on," the doctor said. "Let's get you all examined. Better safe than sorry." They did. One by one, they went through triage, got examined by different doctors and nurses, got treated for various cold-related injuries. Mason had first-degree frostbite on 3 fingers. The doctor gave him warming instructions and told him he'd been lucky. Trace had mild hypothermia. They gave him warm fluids and kept him for observation for 2 hours. Knox had frostbitten toes, 2nd degree, painful but manageable with proper care. Bishop had a minor case of hypothermia as well, probably from riding double with Diesel and sharing his body heat. But they were all fundamentally okay. Bruised, exhausted, hurting,
but alive and okay. By noon, they were sitting in the hospital cafeteria, drinking mediocre coffee and eating pre-packaged sandwiches that tasted like miracles because they were hot and they were safe. Around them, medical staff moved with purpose, and the sounds of the hospital, beeping monitors, overhead pages, rolling gurneys, became a strange kind of comfort. "We're not going to make Flagstaff today," Cole said quietly. "No," Reed agreed. "We stay here until Diesel's stable, until we know he's going to make it." "What if it takes days?" Ryder asked. "Then it takes days. We don't leave a brother behind. Ever." No one argued. That was the code. That was the way it had always been. They found a cheap motel within walking distance of the hospital and got rooms, one for every 2 men, just like they always did on runs. They took turns showering, washing away the cold and the fear and the memory of that endless night in the trailer.
They slept in shifts, 2 men always at the hospital in case Diesel woke up or his condition changed. That evening, the doctor finally let them see him. They went in one at a time, standing beside his bed, looking at their brother who was so much smaller now, connected to tubes and monitors, his face pale against the white pillows. Reed went first. He pulled up a chair and sat down. "Hey, brother," he said softly, "you scared the hell out of us. You know that?" Diesel's eyes flickered open. "Did we make it?" His voice was barely a whisper, rough from the oxygen tube. "We made it. We're in Gallup. You're in the hospital, but you're going to be fine. Doctor says you'll be back on your bike in a few days." Diesel smiled weakly. "That trailer, that was crazy." "Yeah, it was, but it worked. Reed's crazy idea saved us." "We saved each other," Reed said firmly. "That's what brothers do." Diesel's hand moved slightly on the bed, and Reed took it, held it. "Thank you," Diesel whispered, "for not leaving me." "Never," Reed said, his voice thick. "We never leave a brother behind." They sat like that for a while, not talking, just being present. Then a nurse came in and said Diesel needed to rest, and Reed stood up and walked out, his eyes wet, his chest tight with emotion he couldn't name. When they were done, Reed pushed his plate away and looked at his brothers. "We still going to Flagstaff?" They all nodded. Of course they were going. That was the whole point. The storm hadn't changed that. "Then let's ride," Reed said. "But first, we're going to do something." "What?" Mason asked. "We're going to find a phone booth or a payphone. Does this town even have those anymore? And we're going to call every single person we know and tell them we love them. Because last night, we almost didn't get the chance." No one argued. They reached Flagstaff that afternoon. The cemetery was on a hill overlooking the town, with views of the San Francisco peaks in the distance. Snow covered the graves, but they found the ones they were looking for. 12 headstones, 12 names, 12 brothers who'd ridden their last ride. Reed pulled out a bottle of whiskey and poured a shot on each grave. The whiskey soaked into the snow, dark against white. The brothers stood in a circle, heads bowed, remembering. "To the fallen," Reed said. "To the fallen," they echoed. Then Cole spoke. "I want to add a name to that list, a name that almost was on there." Everyone looked at him. "Reed," Cole said, "for getting us through last night, for seeing what we couldn't see, for making the call when it mattered." "I didn't do anything," Reed started. "Bullshit," Diesel cut him off. "You saved our lives. Own it." Reed looked at his brothers, at the men he'd ride with until the wheels fell off, at the family he'd chosen. "We saved each other," he said. "That's what we do." They stood there for a while, letting the moment settle. Then Hawk spoke up. "I think we need to tell that story, the trailer story, every year at every memorial run, because it's part of who we are now. It's part of the legend." "The legend of Reed's crazy idea," Knox said, grinning. "The legend of the brothers who rode into a semi-trailer to escape a blizzard," Trace added. "The legend of surviving the impossible,"
Bishop said quietly. Reed nodded slowly. All right, we tell the story. We remember. And we make sure every new brother knows. When the storm hits, you find shelter. You use your head. You take care of each other, no matter what. They raised the whiskey bottle one more time, passing it around, each man taking a drink. When it came back to Reed, he held it up to the sky. To the brothers on this hill, he said, and to the brothers still riding, may we honor you with every mile. May we remember you with every breath. May we ride together again someday, on a road that never ends. Amen, they said together. Then they stood in silence, 9 brothers in a cemetery, the wind cold but calm, the sun breaking through the clouds, and the mountains watching over them like guardians. The ride home was different, slower, more careful. They took back roads instead of highways, stopping at every small town, calling home more often, checking in with each other constantly. The storm had changed something in them, made them more aware of their mortality, more grateful for the miles they had left. They stopped for the night in Albuquerque, getting hotel rooms and real beds for the first time in days. They gathered in Reed's room, boots off, beers in hand, and talked about the trailer again because they couldn't stop talking about it, couldn't stop marveling at the insane luck and perfect timing of it all. "What do you think happened to the driver?" Mason asked. "Probably got a ride before the storm hit," Bishop said. "Left the truck to be picked up later." "Or maybe," Dalton said quietly. Everyone looked at him. "Knew what?" Reed asked. "That we'd need it. Maybe he left it there on purpose, like an angel or something." There was a pause. Then Diesel snorted. "An angel who drives a semi? That's a new one." But Reed didn't laugh. He thought about the timing, about how perfectly everything had lined up, about how in the middle of nowhere, in the worst possible moment, there had been exactly what they needed. "Maybe," Reed said. "Or maybe the universe just decided we weren't done riding yet." "I like that better," Cole said. "The universe wanted us to keep going." They drank to that. The next day, they rolled into Amarillo. The clubhouse was waiting, warm and loud with brothers who'd heard about the storm and were relieved to see them alive. There was food, beer, stories, and laughter, the kind of celebration that comes when you've looked death in the face and walked away. But late that night, after everyone else had gone home or passed out, Reed and Cole stood outside the clubhouse looking up at the stars. "You ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't seen that trailer?" Cole asked. "Every hour," Reed said. "We would have died out there. Yeah, all of us. Yeah." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm glad you're my brother, blood and patch. I'm glad we rode together." "We're still riding," Reed said. "I know, but I wanted to say it anyway, because last night taught me something. You don't wait to say the things that matter. You say them now, while you can." Reed looked at his brother, and something in his chest tightened. "I'm glad you're my brother too," he said, "and I'm glad we're still here, still riding, still trying." They stood there for a while longer, 2 brothers under the stars, alive against all odds, grateful for every breath. 6 months later, Reed got a letter. It came to the clubhouse, addressed simply to The Brothers, Amarillo, Texas. The postmark was from Flagstaff. Inside was a single piece of paper, handwritten in neat, careful script. "Dear Brothers, I'm writing to you because I don't know your names, but I know your story. I'm a trucker, or I was, until I retired last month. The semi you found on Route 66 was mine. I'd been hauling for 30 years, and that was supposed to be my last run. But my rig broke down in the middle of nowhere, right before the storm hit. A state trooper gave me a ride to Gallup, and I left the truck to be towed later. When I came back for it 3 days later, I found your message on the trailer. I also found the lock broken and tire tracks inside. At first, I was angry, thought I'd been robbed. But then the mechanic who towed it told me what the conditions were like that night. 8 degrees.
70-mile-an-hour winds. He said anyone caught in that storm without shelter would have died. Then I understood. You broke into my trailer because you had to. You survived because you were smart enough to see what was there and brave enough to take it. And somehow, my last haul before retirement turned into the most important one I ever made, because it saved 9 lives. I'm not a religious man, but I believe things happen for a reason. I believe that truck broke down in that exact spot because you were going to need it. And I believe you were meant to survive, because the world still needs men like you. Men who take care of each other, who don't give up, who find a way. Thank you for the message on my trailer. Thank you for letting me know that my last ride mattered. And thank you for reminding me that we're all brothers on this road, whether we wear patches or not. Ride safe, ride long, and if you ever see a broken down rig in the middle of nowhere, remember, it might be there for a reason. Frank Morrison, retired trucker. Reed read the letter 3 times. Then he called the brothers together and read it aloud. When he finished, there was silence. Then Diesel said, "We need to find this guy." "Why?" Mason asked. "To thank him, to buy him a beer, to tell him he's an honorary brother." They found Frank Morrison 2 weeks later, living in a small house outside Flagstaff with his wife and a garage full of model trucks. He was in his 70s, weathered and gray, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. When Reed and the brothers showed up on his doorstep, he stared at them for a moment. Then he smiled. "You're the ones," he said. "We're the ones," Reed confirmed. Frank invited them in. His wife, Martha, made coffee and set out cookies, and they sat in the living room and talked for hours. Frank told them about his 30 years on the road, about the storms he'd driven through and the breakdowns he'd survived. The brothers told him about the memorial run, about the blizzard, about the moment Reed had seen the trailer and made the crazy call. "It wasn't crazy," Frank said. "It was brilliant. You saw what you needed and you took it. That's survival. That's brotherhood." "We broke your lock," Reed said. "We want to pay for the damage." Frank waved it off. "Forget the lock. That lock saved your lives. Best investment I ever made." They gave him a patch anyway, an honorary club patch with his name embroidered on it. Frank held it like it was made of gold. "I never thought I'd wear one of these," he said, his voice thick. "You earned it," Cole said. "You're a brother now, one of us." Frank's eyes were wet. "It's an honor." They stayed until evening, talking and laughing and sharing stories. When they finally left, Frank walked them out to their bikes. He stood there in his driveway, holding his patch, watching them mount up. "Ride safe," he called. "Always," Reed called back. They fired up the engines and rolled out, 9 brothers and 1 more in spirit. The sun setting behind them, the road stretching out ahead. 1 year later, they did the memorial run again. This time, they stopped at the spot where the trailer had been. Reed had marked the coordinates. There was nothing there now, just empty road and desert. But they stopped anyway, killed their engines, and stood in silence. Then, Reed pulled out a small plaque they'd had made. It was metal, weatherproof, about the size of a license plate. Engraved on it were the words, "Here, 9 brothers survived the storm. Because one brother saw what was possible, and another brother left the door unlocked. Remember, we ride together. We survive together. We are never alone." They buried it in the ground, marking the spot. Then they mounted up and rode on to Flagstaff, to the cemetery, to the graves of the brothers they'd lost. This time, there were 13 headstones. Frank Morrison had died 2 months earlier, peacefully in his sleep, wearing his patch. His wife had called to tell them, and they'd ridden up for the funeral. They'd stood beside his grave and poured whiskey and promised to remember. Now, standing in the cemetery again, Reed looked at Frank's headstone and smiled. "Thank you, brother," he said quietly, "for the shelter, for the grace, for reminding us why we ride. The wind picked up, cold but not cruel, and it carried his words away. They rode home through clear skies and empty roads, 9 brothers bound by miles and memory, by storms survived and grace received. And every year after that, they stopped at the plaque, and they remembered the night the blizzard hit Route 66. And they told the story to every new brother who joined the club. The story of the trailer. The story of Reed's crazy idea. The story of 9 brothers who refused to die. And the story of Frank Morrison, the trucker who became a brother, whose last haul saved 9 lives, and proved that sometimes the road provides exactly what you need, exactly when you need it. Because that's what brotherhood is. That's what the ride is. And that's why they keep going, mile after mile, year after year, until the wheels fall off and the engines go silent, and they ride that final road into the forever. But not yet. Not yet. 2 days after the storm, Diesel was stable enough to be moved to a regular room. The pneumonia was responding to antibiotics, his core temperature had normalized, and his oxygen levels were good without supplemental support. The brothers visited him that morning before heading to Flagstaff. "You're finishing the run without me," Diesel said. It wasn't a question. "We have to," Reed said. "The brothers we lost, they're waiting. But we're coming back for you. And next year, you ride with us again." "Damned right I do." Diesel's smile was weak but genuine. "You tell 'em my story."
Tell them about the night we almost died and the trailer that saved us. Tell them I survived because my brothers wouldn't let me go. "Well, tell them," Cole promised. Each brother said goodbye, clasping Diesel's hand, promising to return. Mason left him a photo of Emma. Trace left his father's old dog tags for luck. Bishop left his military challenge coin. Knox left a flask with good whiskey. They left pieces of themselves to keep him company. Then they rode west, 8 bikes instead of 9, the empty space in their formation a reminder and a promise. The roads were clear now, the storm just a memory in the snow piled on the shoulders. They rode through New Mexico into Arizona, through landscape that shifted from desert to high country, from barren to beautiful. They reached Flagstaff by evening, the San Francisco peaks rising like sentinels in the golden light. The cemetery was exactly as they remembered, peaceful, dignified, overlooking the valley. 12 headstones waited for them, 12 names etched in stone. They dismounted and stood in a line, 8 brothers honoring 12. Reed pulled out the bottle of whiskey, the good stuff, the kind you saved for special occasions, and poured a shot on each grave. The whiskey soaked into the ground, an offering and a remembrance. "To the fallen," Reed said, his voice carrying in the thin mountain air. "To the fallen," the others echoed. Then Reed spoke again, improvising, letting the words come from somewhere deeper than thought. "We almost joined you this year, brothers. We rode into a storm that should have killed us. But we made it. We survived. And we're here to tell you that your memory kept us going. The thought of leaving you unremembered, unhonored, unvisited, that's what made us fight. That's what made us find shelter. That's what made us refuse to quit." He paused, looking at the headstones, seeing faces in his memory. Men who'd laughed with him, ridden with him, bled with him. "We lost Diesel for a few hours. He got sick in the cold. But we got him to a hospital, and he's going to be fine. Because that's what you taught us, no brother left behind, ever. We carry that with us every day. We honor you by living that way." Cole stepped forward. "I want to add something to the memorial this year. Not a name, thank God, but a lesson. We learned something in that trailer, in that storm. We learned that crazy ideas can save your life. That brotherhood isn't just about riding together, it's about surviving together.
that sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it, and you have to be smart enough to see it and brave enough to take it. We learned, Mason added, his voice shaking slightly, that we're not invincible, that the road can take us at any time, and that makes every ride, every mile, every moment with our brothers more precious. I'm going home to my daughter, and I'm going to hold her and tell her I love her, and I'm never going to take another day for granted. One by one, the brothers spoke. They shared what the storm had taught them, what the night in the trailer had meant, what survival had cost, and what it had given them. They spoke of fear and faith, of desperation and hope, of the moment when death felt certain and life felt like a gift they didn't deserve but received anyway. When they were done speaking, they stood in silence for a long moment. The wind moved through the cemetery, cold but gentle, and somewhere in the distance a hawk cried. The sun was setting, painting the peaks in shades of gold and crimson, and the world felt both vast and intimate, both eternal and fleeting. Next year, Reed said finally, we come back with Diesel, all 9 of us, and we tell this story again because it's part of who we are now. It's part of the legend. The legend of the trailer, Hawk softly. The legend of Reed's crazy idea, Knox added. The legend of 9 brothers who refused to die, Bishop finished. They raised the whiskey bottle one last time, passing it around, each man taking a drink. When it came back to Reed, he held it up to the darkening sky. To the brothers on this hill, he said, and to the brothers still riding, may we honor you with every mile. May we remember you with every breath. May we ride together again someday, on a road that never ends. And may we live worthy of the grace we've been given. Amen, they said together. Then they stood in silence as night fell, 8 brothers in a cemetery, the stars beginning to emerge overhead, and the mountains watching over them like ancient guardians who understood the weight of memory and the cost of loyalty. They stayed in Flagstaff that night, getting a cheap motel and sleeping hard for the first time since the storm. In the morning, they rode back to Gallup. Diesel was sitting up in bed when they arrived, color back in his face, breathing easy. How was it? He asked. Perfect, Reed said. But it'll be better next year when you're there. Damn straight. They stayed for a few more hours, telling Diesel everything. The ride, the cemetery, the words they'd spoken, the whiskey they'd poured. They told him about Frank Morrison's letter and the promise they'd made. They told him about the plaque they would make and bury at the site of the trailer. I want to be there for that, Diesel said. When you put up the plaque, I want to stand at that spot and remember. You will be, Reed promised. We'll do it next year on the way to Flagstaff, all 9 of us. When they finally left Gallup, Diesel stood at his hospital room window and watched them ride out. 8 bikes rolling down the street, engines rumbling, brothers heading home. He raised his hand in salute, and though they couldn't see him, he knew they felt it. The ride back to Amarillo took 2 days. They stopped often, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They ate at small diners and slept in roadside motels. They talked about the storm, about the trailer, about how close they'd come to dying and how grateful they were to be alive. They talked about their families, their hopes, their fears. They talked about what it meant to be a brother, what it meant to ride together, what it meant to refuse to quit even when quitting seemed like the only option. When they finally rolled into Amarillo, the clubhouse was waiting. Word had spread. The brothers who'd stayed behind had heard about the storm, about the survival, about Diesel in the hospital. They'd prepared a celebration, food, beer, and a warm space to tell the story. And Reed told it. He told them about the moment the storm hit, about the decision to push west, about seeing the trailer and making the crazy call. He told them about the night inside, the cold, the fear, the stories they'd shared.
He told them about Diesel getting sick, about the desperate ride to Gallup, about the snowplow driver who'd helped them. He told them about the hospital, about Frank Morrison's letter, about the memorial in Flagstaff. When he finished, the clubhouse was silent. Then someone started clapping, and soon everyone was on their feet, applauding, shouting, celebrating. Because the story wasn't just about survival. It was about brotherhood, about the code they all lived by, about the truth that no brother gets left behind no matter what. That night, Reed went home to Sarah and his kids. He held them all close, breathing in the smell of his daughter's shampoo and his son's little boy sweat, feeling his wife's heartbeat against his chest. He whispered that he loved them, that he'd missed them, that he was sorry for scaring them. "Are you done?" Sarah asked. "Done with these crazy runs?" Reed thought about it. He thought about the brothers on the hill in Flagstaff, about the promise he'd made to remember. He thought about Diesel in the hospital, about the trailer that had saved them, about the grace they'd been given. "No," he said honestly, "I'll never be done. But I'll be more careful, I'll be smarter, and I'll always come home to you." Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. "That's all I ask." They stood there for a long time, holding each other, grateful for the moment, for the breath, for the life they still had together. Because that's what the storm had taught him. Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is promised. Every day is a gift. Every mile is precious, and every moment with the people you love is a kind of miracle. And Reed intended to live that way, gratefully, fully, without hesitation or regret, for as long as the road would let him. The engines are still roaring. The brothers are still riding. And the story is still being written, 1 mile at a time.